Hi friends, today I am going to discuss about Redis cache. So before, please subscribe my channel, please follow and share with others. So that will be helpful for me to create a new videos and upload in a YouTube. Thank you. So let's discuss what is Redis. Redis is a in-memory database. No, it is like a database, relational database, but which is a very powerful, like highly performance, faster way to retrieve the data and return. So the data kind of you are going to store in Redis is like configuration, metadata. These are the main kind of data we store in a Redis DB. Okay, so Redis is actually a framework which act as which is a Redis database also, which is a cache also, and which is a message breaker also. So today, but we are going to use Redis as a cache, okay, not as a database. Okay. So in what kind of situations or scenarios we use Redis as a cache in our day-to-day applications, right? So suppose whenever application need a data the data which is kind of constant, not getting updated regularly. So there are so many requests coming to get the data from the database. So you can say configuration or a metadata which is accessed by applications, which is not really getting updated regularly. So it can be stored in a Redis cache for the faster way of retrieval from the Redis cache. Okay. So there is one more case, like if you are the requests for that particular data are very much repeated. So suppose let's consider user uh, data. For the user data, we are getting the data from DB. So it is time consuming, and it requires more resources to get it from the DB rather than getting it from the Redis cache. Suppose 100 requests are hitting DB, so that will need a lot of resources, a lot of memory, but and retrieving the data from DB is also kind of like which takes time to retrieve the data. But in case of Redis cache, if you store the data in Redis cache, it is fast, very much fast compared to the traditional relational databases. Okay. So application which actually getting the data from the DB can store the data in Redis cache. Suppose the application make a request to get the user details from Redis DB. Okay, but the data it is using Redis cache to store the Redis user details. Okay. Suppose that data not exist in Redis cache, so it will call the Redis, it will call the relational database, and after relational database returning those data, it is stored in the Redis cache. Once Redis cache has that data, it returns same to application every time. It will not call DB traditional DP. Okay, this is how Redis cache works. So there is one more useful scenario component with Redis cache is like Redis cache has a expiry on data, particular data. Suppose you are storing a user data, so you have to store this data for particular time, like you can say 5 hours. After 5 hours this user details will be expired and get deleted from the Redis cache. So it will be again calling the DB to get the data, latest data, and return it back to application. Okay, so let's try to implement this Spring Redis cache in Spring Boot application. So before that one, you have to install a Redis cache. How to install a Redis cache? So I will show you. So you have to go to this GitHub URL. You can see these are the Redis softwares available for Windows. Okay, you can download zip file or in MSI installer, so to install. So I have downloaded zip file, so I opened that zip file here. So once you open, you have Redis server. So you have to start this, double click on this one, you have to start the server. So already I have started the server. So Redis server started in 6379 port. Okay, there is another Redis CLI. It is a command prompt. If you double click on that one, it will open this window. So here you can check what are all the keys stored in Redis. Okay, let's say keys star. It will give all the keys which are stored in the Redis. Okay, so let's try to implement this in a Spring Boot application. Let's create the application from beginning. Let's give the project name as Spring Data Redis. Okay, so we are using Maven Java version 17. Click next. We have to add the dependency Redis, that is Spring Data Redis, and you have to add the another dependency web, that is Spring Web. Okay, so these two dependencies are important to build a Spring Boot Redis cache application. Okay, so project is imported, created. So let's try to, not this one, sorry, Spring Data Redis. Okay, let's try to add the properties. So let me add the properties. So these are the properties required. So server port application is running, should be running on 8087 port. Spring Data Redis host, where the application Redis server is running. So it is running in local, so I am giving local host. And Spring Data Redis port, so it is running in 6379. So you can see here server is running in 6379. So locally it is running in 6379. So Spring Data, this is a custom property So I have given name like cache expiry equal to 1. It means it it expires in a 5 minutes. The data in the Redis expires in a 5 minutes. Suppose if you have added a user details with the key some user something, so that data will expires after 5 minutes of TTL. Okay, I will show you how it expires. Okay, let's try to create a user model. I have the code already. Let's paste the code. So user class we have implemented. So it is implementing serializable. So it has a two parameters, ID and name. Okay. So I have created a setter getter method. We are going to store a user details in a cache. So it is like, let me explain you how what we are going to implement. So user details are fetched from database and stored on a cache. So based on the key called ID. Suppose user having ID called 1. So based on the key equal to ID 1, it is stored in the Redis cache. It is easy to fetch the user details for particular user. Suppose user has the ID 1. For that ID, if you pass the key as a ID, so the data can be retrieved from Redis cache for each user. No need to go to database and fetch the details every time. So the user details always, uh, will be written same every time, right? Why you have to go to the database and fetch? So it is easy to faster way to retrieve the data from Redis cache. Okay, so let's implement a service class, not service class. Let's go for configuration, Redis cache configuration. So I will explain you how to create Redis cache configuration. So you have to create a class Redis cache config, annotate it with @configuration. So you have to get the expiry time which we defined in the application properties. So here we have defined Spring Data Redis cache expiry time, which we have to use in a Redis cache config to set it in a configuration, so that data expires after that TTL, right? Okay. So we have to create two variables. One is Cachy Manager, one is Cachy name. So Cachy Manager I have given name as user Cachy Manager and Cachy name is user Cachy. So in this user cache, the details related to user are stored. Okay. So you have to create a user cache manager method, which is a primary with the bean name as a user cache manager. Okay. So it is implementing a latest connection factory for connecting the Redis cache. Okay. So we have to create a configuration map, Redis configuration map. So for this one we are adding cache with the default config, cache config. What is default cache config is having? So it is having disabling the caching null values and that entry TTL, it is expiry time we are specifying, and serialize with Redis serialization context. So this is the type of serialization we are using. Okay. So once cache configuration is ready, so we are initializing the Redis manager with cache config and building that one. Okay. This is what Redis cache configuration you have to configure. Suppose if you have multiple uh, cache, you want to use multiple cache, you can define another cache name, something like, if you suppose if you are storing a product details, so you can create another, you can say user cache, or you can say product cache, and you can create a, instead of user cache manager, you can create another product cache manager. In this only same, you have to copy same thing and create for product. Okay. So something you have to create for all the cache, or separate, you can create separate cache manager for all the caches which you are creating to store the data. Okay. For now we are only creating user cache to store the user details. Let me delete. Okay. Now the cache Redis cache config is done. Okay. Now we have to create a cache manager. Okay. Let's copy this code. Now you can see you have to create a user cache manager class and annotate with component. So here you can see three methods. One is cacheable annotated, one is cache put annotated, one is cache evict. What is cacheable? Here we are getting the user details, so it is calling the user service. Suppose the first time user, when we call this method get user details, the data will not be there in the user cache. Okay. So it calls the user details service and get the data, get the response, the user details. So it is returning user details, user object, right? So it is stored in the cache while returning back to controller. Okay. Let me copy controller and service class both. Okay. So I will explain you from controller how it goes. Okay. When the request comes for getting the user details by ID, we are passing a ID. For particular user we have to get the user details. So it will call the cache manager, user cache manager. Okay. So once the call comes to get details in the user cache manager, it will check the user details with the particular user ID in the cache. If it is present, it returns the data directly back to controller. Otherwise it will call the user service with the get user details. Okay, so here it is passing a user id. In actual scenario, so the data will be retrieved from backend database, but here I am not using any database. For now I just added a hard coded values, like I created a two users with id 1 and id 2 Ram Sham. So I am using this data to for the demo. Okay, so get user details, when it called, so it will get all the users and it will check this id whether this user exists in this list or not. If it is present, it will return that particular object, user object, back. Okay, if it is not present, it will throw a error message, user not for a found. Okay, so once user service return the data back user, right, so it will be stored in the cache and it will be returned back to controller. Controller is returning user as a user details for particular id. Okay, so let me should test the application and show you how it is working. Okay, so before that one important thing is you have to enable the caching by annotating the application in the application main application class. So you have to annotate it with enable caching so that caching is enabled. Okay, let's run this application. First let's build this application. Okay, build is success. Let's start the application. Run as Java application. You can see the application started on 8087 port. Okay, so let's test the application from Postman. So this is the URL, localhost port 8087, the path we are using user. So I am passing id is a 1. Okay, I am using a get method. You can see the response name Ram and id 1. So this is what we hard coded in the application, right? So let me show you. So I have added a two users. One is id with 1 and Ram. So second user id with 2 and Shyam. So when we pass the id as a 1, so this method get user by id is called, which is passing a id 1 and it is calling user Cachy Manager. So it will call the user service. Since the data is not present in the cache for this user, if you can see, I have printed I am inside cache. Okay, the same is printed in the console. I am inside cache, right? See, so why it is printed? Because it entered the method and it is calling the user service to get the user details, since the data not exist in the cache. for this particular user ID. Okay, so it calls the service and gets the data from this application since the user is found. Okay, let's try for another user. Suppose I am giving 4. Since the 4 user is not configured here, we have configured only 2 user with ID 1 and ID 2. It's throw error message. So it is showing internal server error. You can see here Java lang exception, user not found. Since it is a default error message, internal server error, so it is throwing user not found error message. Okay, that is what we are returning here. So let's try to test other operations. Like if you can see, okay, so I will show you another thing. See here, we are printing I am inside cache. Since the data is not present in the cache, so it is calling user service, and it is, so that is why it is calling user. It means the data is not present in the cache. Now the data is present in the cache. How to verify that one? There are two ways. So you can use CLI command. So how to open that CLI I have shown you. So go to this Redis. There is a Redis CLI. So double click on that one. So it will open this. Okay. So if you type key star, so it will list down all the keys stored in the database. So we are storing user cache with the key 1, that is user ID 1. Let's print what it is. Sorry. let me copy this one. Okay, so you can see the data user with the name Ram and ID 1. So it is stored in the database. Okay, so now if we try to call this method get users detail by ID, it should directly get the data from cache. It should not call the user service to provide those user details, right? So how can we ensure it is getting the data from cache only? So here we are printing I am inside the cache, right? This is the one way I am showing. So it will not print this one, it will not come inside this method if it found the data in cache. Okay, let's test the application. So pass the ID, so it returns the response. Okay, so it is printing I am inside cache. Okay, why it is printing I am inside cache? Since it didn't find the data on the cache, it is calling user service, but in actual we saw it is present in the cache, right? Let's verify this one. You can see still it is present in the cache, but it is not returning the from the cache. So let's clear the console. So it's actually returning from the cache only. uh, I think it was the older one. So you can see it is not printing the I am inside cache, since it is not going inside this one to call the user service to get the details, but it is calling the cache and getting the data from cache only. Okay. So let's check. So still the data is there. So let's try to hit one more time. Okay. So it is returning the data from cache only, since we don't see the console the data. I am inside the cache, it is not entering in this method itself. Okay. This is how get method will work to store the data in cache. Cacheable annotation will work. Okay. Now let's suppose we have given the expiry time 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes, if you check this one, so this should go, this will get deleted automatically. Let's wait for 5 minutes. Okay. So before that one, we will test other operations. Let's say update the user details which we stored in the ID, right? Okay. So we have user, we are going to update name of the user. Okay. So how it will work? Let's go through code. So I have added a put mapping. So I am passing the ID of the user and the name for which I am going to update the name of the user. Okay. So it will call Cachy Manager. So with the update details, here it is passing user ID. The user ID here what we are passing should be same as the key name. Okay. The key name is stored as a key in the cache. The spelling should not be different for key and what we are passing the user ID variable, right? Okay. So we are passing the name to update the user details. So it will call the user service to update the user details. Let's go inside user details. So it will check for particular user, it will get the user and it will set the name. So updated user is returned back. Okay. Once it returns the user object back, the updated user details stored in the cache. Okay. This is how update will work. So it always calls the service to get the latest data and store the latest data in the cache. Okay. Let's check whether the user details, if you can see user details we stored in the cache with the ID 1 is cleared because 5 minutes completed. So it automatically deletes the user details. Let's try to. So now you can see it is returning RAM with ID 1, and in the console you can see I am inside the cache. It means the data is not found on the cache. So it called the user service now and got the user details for user ID 1 and return back. So the same thing again it's stored on the cache. Now if you see, again it stored user details on the cache. Let's verify this one. You can see RAM ID 1 again it stored on the cache. So it will get expired after 5 minutes since we set the expiry time as 5 minutes. Let's try to test update. Okay, put. So we have to pass user ID and name what we are going to update. So I am passing Jan as a name. So it will update Ram as a Jan. Okay, let's. So we got the response name a Jan with ID 1. Okay, so the name is updated as Jan. Let's verify in the cache. You can see user cache with ID 1. So it is name is John and ID 1. So it is updated the cache. Okay, this is how put will work. Okay, so now we will work on delete operation. Okay, how delete operation works. Okay, let's go to controller. So I am using delete mapping. So delete users details by ID. So where we have to pass ID for particular user. So I am going to delete the data from cache. Okay, so it is calling Cachy Manager with the method delete user details. So it is taking user ID as a key with the value 1. So this user ID, the key should be same. Okay, so whatever value you are passing in the user ID, it will delete particular data from the cache. Okay, let's test this one. So we have user with the ID 1 in the cache, right? Let's test delete. So we are passing user ID 1 to delete the data from cache. We can see success is written. Okay, so we have to check whether the data is deleted or not. Okay, let's start. You can see there is no key user cache with the, right, it was there before, now it is deleted. Okay, this is how it gets deleted. Okay, suppose we will try to create more than one user. Okay, we have already configured 2 user, right? Let's try to create. So it created a one user with ID 1 and RAM. Okay, let's see. So again we got the user 1. So let's try to create another user. So user with ID 2 is already configured, so we can use that one. So the name is Sham with ID 2. It got created. Okay, let's try to check Redis. You can see user cache 1 with ID 1, user cache 2 with ID 2. Let's check the user cache 2. You can see the name Sham and ID 2. Okay, so we have 2 users. Okay, so we have to delete all the users at a time. So for that one also we have API. So delete all the users. Sorry, let's modify this name. Okay, so it will delete all the users where we are not passing the any ID, particular ID. So it will call the user Cachy Manager. Here you can see, here we have not mentioned the key. So here we mention all entries equal to true. it means it delete all the entries from the table. Okay, I mean it deletes all the entries from the cache. Let's test this one. We don't have to pass any ID. Okay, let's perform delete. You can see the success message, and let's verify form. You can see user cache is deleted 1, user cache 2 is deleted. Okay, so this is how we do cache deletion. Okay, so we covered cacheable, cache put, cache evict. Cacheable, which stores the data in cache. So after getting the data from service particular method, if it finds the data in cache, it returns particular data from cache without calling the implementation methods. Cache put always calls service classes methods, implementation methods, to get the real data and update that particular data, okay, in the cache. Okay, for updating the cache. So cache evict, it will delete the data from cache. If you pass the particular key, it will use that key to delete, or if you pass all entries as a true, it will delete all the keys whatever exists in the particular cache. Here we are using user cache as a cache name, so it will delete particular cache name. So we have to provide what is the cache name as a value, and the key or all entries, and Cachy Manager what we have created. So in the Redis config file we have specified what is Cachy Manager, what is cache name. Okay, so please subscribe my channel, so that will be very helpful for me to create more videos on Java upcoming Spring Boot or any Java technology videos. Thank you so much. Let's wind up.